For over 2 years now, King Charles has been quietly rewriting what it means to lead a monarchy while fighting cancer. And the latest health update out of Buckingham Palace tells a story that's part medical milestone, part reminder of just how uncertain the road ahead still is. To understand where things stand now, you have to go back to the beginning, to a month that changed everything for the royal family. It started, almost by accident, with a routine procedure. In mid-January 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that the king's condition was described as benign, and he would be undergoing a corrective procedure in hospital the following week. This was for an enlarged prostate, a common condition that affects thousands of men every year. And nothing about the announcement suggested anything more serious was coming. Charles had actually been diagnosed after experiencing symptoms during a stay at his Birkhall residence in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. He checked into the London clinic, underwent the procedure, and by January 29th, he'd been discharged and was said to be doing well. NBC News or Cancer Stories then? Just a week later, everything changed. On February 5th, 2024, Buckingham Palace issued a statement that stunned the country. During the king's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, doctors noted a separate issue of concern. Subsequent diagnostic tests identified a form of cancer. Seen in what's important to understand here is that this wasn't the diagnosis anyone was looking for. Experts described it as what's known as an incidental diagnosis, meaning the medical team wasn't searching for cancer at all when they found it. They were treating something routine, something benign, stumbled onto something far more serious in the process. Today.com, the palace was notably guarded about the details. To this day, Buckingham Palace has never specified what kind of cancer the king has, only confirming that it isn't prostate cancer. No stage, no prognosis, no further clarification, just a diagnosis and a plan to treat it. Today.com, according to the official statement at the time, Charles had already begun a schedule of regular treatments and was advised to step back from public-facing duties, though he would continue with state business and official paperwork as usual. In other words, the crown doesn't stop just because the man wearing it is sick. Red boxes still needed signing. Government business still needed his attention. The mechanics of monarchy don't pause for chemotherapy. CBC Charles himself struck a tone of gratitude rather than fear in that first statement. He said he was grateful to his medical team for their swift intervention, made possible by his recent hospital procedure, and that he remained wholly positive about his treatment. Seeing on what makes this moment in royal history even more extraordinary is what happened just weeks later. This wasn't a health crisis affecting one person. It hit the family from two directions at once. Just weeks after the king's diagnosis, his daughter-in-law, Kate Middleton, who had undergone abdominal surgery in January, announced her own cancer diagnosis in March and began undergoing preventative chemotherapy. Yahoo! For a brief period in 2024, the two most publicly visible figures tied to the future of the monarchy, the reigning king and the future queen consort-in-waiting, were both fighting cancer simultaneously, largely behind closed doors, while still expected to represent an institution built on stability and continuity. By April 2024, Charles had recovered enough to resume public appearances, and from that point on, the palace began sharing more regular, if still vague, updates about his condition. He returned to events gradually, first smaller engagements, then larger ones, always with visible caution from his medical team and household. Staff, not every update since has been good news. At one point during his treatment, the king was briefly hospitalized after experiencing side effects from his cancer treatment, which forced the postponement of his afternoon engagements that day. The palace's language was direct and unembellished. No spin, just a plain acknowledgement that his body needed rest. It served as a quiet reminder that behind the polished appearances and ceremonial duties, an active cancer treatment was still very much ongoing. With all the unpredictability that comes with it, global ends throughout it all, Charles kept working. Royal watchers and aides alike have remarked on his refusal to let the illness define or limit his role. Camilla has been particularly candid about this trait of his. She's described her husband as someone who simply manages the illness day to day, refuses to slow down. and in her words, won't do what he's told. Then came December 2025, and with it, the most significant update on his health since the initial diagnosis nearly 2 years earlier. In a rare, deeply personal video message broadcast on British television as part of the Stand Up to Cancer campaign, Charles shared news that many hadn't expected so soon. He announced that thanks to early diagnosis, effective intervention, and adherence to his doctor's orders, his schedule of cancer treatment could be reduced heading into 2026. Deacon Herald didn't just deliver the news clinically, he framed it as something bigger than his own recovery. Charles called the milestone both a personal blessing and a testimony to the remarkable advances made in cancer care in recent years, adding that he hoped it might offer encouragement to the roughly 50% of people who will be diagnosed with the illness at some point in their lives. He specifically emphasized the importance of catching illness early, saying that early diagnosis simply saves lives, a message clearly meant to resonate beyond the palace walls, aimed at ordinary people watching from home who might be facing their own frightening diagnosis. Deckenrald, but here's where the story requires some careful reading, because reduced is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It does not mean cured. It does not mean remission. It does not mean the king is done with cancer. As of 2026, King Charles is still receiving cancer treatment. It has simply moved to a less frequent, more precautionary phase, according to people who've observed him closely during this period. Interestingly, those same observers describe him as more content and settled in his role as monarch than at almost any other point in his reign. Health struggles notwithstanding. News. So what does all of this actually tell us? More than 2 years on from that first frightening diagnosis? It tells us that the monarchy has been operating quietly and deliberately, under conditions most institutions would consider a crisis, and doing so while maintaining almost total discretion about the medical specifics. We still don't know what type of cancer the king has. We still don't know its stage. We know only what the palace has chosen to disclose. Filtered carefully through statements, video messages, and the occasional aides comment to select outlets, it also tells us that the royal family's approach to illness has shifted, at least publicly, toward more openness than in generations past. Compare this to earlier eras of the monarchy, where health issues were hidden from the public almost entirely until they could no longer be concealed. Charles going public in 2024 and Kate following shortly after marked a notable departure, an acknowledgement, deliberate or not, that the modern monarchy operates under a level of scrutiny and expectation of transparency that simply didn't exist for previous generations of royals. And finally, it leaves an open question hanging over the institution, one that no official statement will answer directly, but that shapes every piece of coverage and speculation about the royal family's future. A king whose treatment is being reduced but not eliminated. A monarch who insists on continuing his full workload despite doctors' cautions. A family that is now weathered to simultaneous cancer diagnoses among its most central figures. All of this naturally raises questions about long-term planning, continuity, and what comes next? Questions the palace has not addressed publicly, and likely won't until circumstances force its hand. For now, what we actually know is this: King Charles remains on the throne. He remains in treatment, even if that treatment has eased. And he remains, by every available account, determined to keep working through it precisely the way he always has.